Welcome to What is Truth, brought to you by the Southern New Mexico Church of God in Las Cruces, New Mexico. What is Truth is a weekly program which seeks to focus our attention on the truth of God's Word. Now, with this week's lesson, here's Pastor Meyer Stahl.
Welcome to the program. Today we're doing part 3 of what is the truth about the Great Tribulation. There's a lot of talk about Great Tribulations. I'll tell you, if you get on an airplane and fly out to Venezuela, come off the plane, start talking to people on the street, and you'll find out the people on the street believe that they're in a great tribulation. And it isn't like we're going to have day one of the tribulation. It's going to be a worldwide thing. It's going to be slowly, it's going to materialize very slowly. So we're going to find out that the globalist, you've heard of globalists, you've heard of globalism. It's a one world government, one world religion, and a one world economy. And to succeed in doing this, they're going to bring down all the economies of the world, are going to crash. And we're going to crash here in the United States of America. Our economy is going to crash. We're going to see proof of that as we go along in the Bible. But before we get started, we'd like to offer 2 very important booklets. And the first booklet is, Why Do You Observe Sunday? You might say, well, my parents observe Sunday, my grandparents observe Sunday, so I observe it. But do you have Bible proof that Sunday is the Sabbath day? That Sunday is the rest day? Can you find that in the Bible? Here's what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches the observance of the Sabbath. That's the 7th day, the day that we call Saturday. Which day did Christ and the apostles observe? Which day did Paul teach Gentile converts to observe? How did the day become changed from the 7th to the first day of the week? Do you know how that happened? This booklet explains it. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 commands us to prove all things. I ask you to please read this booklet with an open mind. If you are already right, honest investigation will but confirm it. If you are wrong, you should want to know it. So the second booklet is, Where Are Enoch and Elijah? And it says here at the bottom of the booklet, it says Enoch was translated that he should not see death. What does that mean, to be translated? Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Yet the Bible reveals that they are not in heaven today. Where are they? Here's the astounding truth. You can have these 2 booklets for free. We have nothing to sell on the program. We'd be happy to also send you a DVD of today's lesson that you could share with friends and relatives, neighbors. And it's all free. We even pay the postage. And all you need to do is call. Let's go to the Bible. Let's try to understand this one world government, one world religion, and one world economy. Let's try to understand that as we go to Matthew chapter 24. So we're going to Matthew 24, and we're going to verse 21. And here it says, in verse 21, For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. It's called the Great Tribulation. It lasts 3.5 years. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. No one would be alive. No one would be left alive here on this planet if Jesus Christ did not intervene. But for the elect's sake, those are the converted Christians, keeping God's laws, obeying God, those days shall be shortened. So those days, this tribulation, if allowed to go any longer, there would nobody be alive. Nobody would be alive. Wow, that is indeed a great tribulation. Now we're going to go back to verse 1 in Matthew 24. So let's drop down to verse 1. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple. And his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. They were spectacular. They were absolutely beautiful. And Jesus said unto them, See you not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And this all happened, we're going to stop here. This all happened in 70 AD when General Titus came with his legions and destroyed the temple and broke down the walls of Jerusalem, and the temple was destroyed. There isn't one stone, you can't find one stone up there on the Temple Mount. It's just not there. It's gone. There's no evidence that there ever was a temple up there. That's how clean it is. Let's see some of the other predictions of Jesus. Let's go down to verse 6. And here it says in verse 6, And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. What is a rumor of a war? Well, back in King James' day, they didn't have TV, radio, newspapers. Someone would come into a town and say that there's a war in Gaul. Well, how would you know? Except other people would come by and say the same thing. See that you be not troubled. This word actually means reports of wars, and reporters report wars. So these things, be not troubled, for these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. So Jesus predicted wars. Did you know that World War I was called the Great War? And some 8.2 million people died in World War I. World War II followed within a generation. Some 52 million people died in World War II. And Revelation chapter 9 in verse 18. We're going to turn there now. Revelation 9 verse 18. It talks about a third of mankind. A third of mankind dying. Wow, that is terrible. Let's read it for ourselves. Chapter 9, verse 18. And here it says, By these three. By what three? By these three, the third part of men were killed. By the fire, by the smoke, and by the brimstone. So a third part of mankind was killed, which issued out of their mouths. So fire, smoke, and brimstone. Now, of course, in King James' day, they didn't know about cannons, they didn't know about bombs, they didn't know about nuclear weapons, and John sees here fire and smoke and brimstone. This is more smoke and more of this fire, fiery. We couldn't describe it, but a third of mankind is destroyed. Now that's quite a few. Now, talking about earthquakes, from the year 1900, each decade had earthquakes of up to 6 on the Richter scale. Up to 6 on the Richter scale. It was some 50 to 60 earthquakes during each decade, like from 1901 to 1910, from 1911 to 1920, from 1921 to 1930, some 50 to 60 as an average earthquakes of an intensity of 6 on the Richter scale. This last decade, which was 2001 to 2011, was 240 earthquakes of an intensity of 6 or better. We've had some major earthquakes around the world, and a lot of people died, a lot of people suffering. People are suffering today as a result of earthquakes that happened around the world. So Jesus Christ was right about those things. Why now would he be wrong about the Great Tribulation? He was right about that there wouldn't be one stone upon another at the Temple Mount. The temple was gone. He was right about the wars. He was right about the plagues. There's plagues today of unbelievable dimension. Ebola is one of them. Zika, yellow fever, dengue. There's MRSA, the flesh-eating virus, and there's all kinds of HIV, typhus, flu. You would think that with all the medicine and the doctors and pharmacology that we have today, you would think that we would have these all these plagues under control. We don't. There are so many incurable diseases that the scientists, the doctors, the pharmaceutical companies cannot come up with the right kind of medicines that would treat it. So what can we do about this? Well, one thing we should do is we should have food and water. Food and water are going to be very, very expensive. Let's turn to Revelation chapter 14. We're coming back with Revelation 14. We'll be back very shortly. Please don't go away. We'll be right back.
Call Mark Goldstein, the Safe Money Guy, at 575-556-2472, to learn about innovative strategies now available to help you grow, protect, and preserve your money and financial future, regardless of market conditions.
Horizon Granite is here.
It's here! Horizon Granite is here. We'll come to you to customize your kitchen and bathroom with beautiful countertops and cabinets. Find out more at horizongranite.com. Call us at 575-650-3180.
Horizon Granite is here.
It's here!
Make yourself a beautiful home.
In case you turned in late, welcome back to the program. In case you turned in late, the subject today is, what is the truth about the Great Tribulation? We're looking at Revelation chapter 6 in verse 6 right now, which talks about slave labor wages. Now, you're going to see how our economy is going to crash. Now, Revelation 6, verse 6, an easy verse to remember. Let's look at it. And here it says, "And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see that you hurt not the oil and the wine." What does that mean? We're stopping here for a moment to explain what that means. Well, first of all, a penny is a denarius. It was the same measure of money that a worker out in the field would make for working out in the field all day. He would come home with a denarius. Now, a measure of wheat is you open up the sack of wheat, you put both hands in, and you fill up both hands with that much wheat. That much wheat is going to cost you a day's labor. Now, if that's not slave wages, I don't know what is. And don't hurt the oil and the wine means don't spill it. It's too valuable to spill. So you must be careful with oil and wine that you don't spill it. So here is an economy that crashes right through the floor. You're lucky to get enough to eat. This is the Great Tribulation. Now, we're going to Revelation chapter 14. By this time, we find the Antichrist is on the scene. He causes, as it says here in chapter 13, we'll look at it briefly. Chapter 13, in verse 16, we'll look at that first. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. And no man might buy or sell save he who had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And this is the 666 that the Bible talks about. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. We're going to stop here for a minute. I'll explain that. Each letter of the alphabet represents a value. Like, for instance, Roman numerals. X is 10. C is 100. M is 1,000. V is 5. So each letter of the alphabet represents an amount, a number. It's numbers. And those numbers will add up to 666. Now, there's a lot of combinations that you could use to make the 666. We don't know until the Antichrist comes on the scene, but we will know that his name adds up to 666. Now let's look at Revelation 14, verse 9. 14, verse 9. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast, that's this government, and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. You sure don't want to drink that wine of the wrath of God. You don't want to accept that mark of the beast, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receives the mark of his name. This is a no-no. You sure don't want to take part in that. So what's the answer? You can't buy or sell. You can't fill your gas tank up. You can't go into the store to buy groceries. You can't pay your rent. You can't pay your mortgage. You can't pay your bills. And you can't work. This is terrible. And this is what Christians went through many, many years ago. And many survived. And many will survive today. We're going to find out how we can survive. Now, one thing we could do is we could store some water. We could store some cans of food or dehydrated food. Start out with dry dehydrated food or some cans of food. Each of us should have at least 30 days supply for each person in our homes. You shouldn't have to run out to the store to buy food every day or once a week. You should have a store of food. You should have some water. You should prepare for things like this. Joseph knew there were 7 years of plenty, and followed by 7 years of famine. What did he do? He prepared. He prepared ahead of time for the famine, those 7 years of famine. He was able to save his family. He was able to save all the people all over the world who came to Egypt for food. Egypt was the only place that there was food. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 28. We're only going to take a minute here in Deuteronomy 28. It starts out with, in verse 1, and it shall come to pass, if you shall hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord your God, to observe and do all his commandments, which I command you this day, that the Lord your God will bless you, all these blessings. And in verse 15, it says, but it shall come to pass, if you will not hearken to the voice of the Lord your God, to observe all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you this day, that all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you. And it talks about the great curses of God, and we're going to look at a couple of them. We don't have time to look at many, but let's look at verse 21. Verse 21. The Lord will make the pestilence cleave unto you until he has consumed you from off the land where you go to possess it. The Lord shall smite you with a consumption, with a fever, with an inflammation, with extreme burning, and with the sword, and with blasting, and with mildew, and they shall pursue you until you perish. You could read the rest of these curses and for yourself and see we're no better than this nation of Israel. They sinned against God, and we're doing the same thing today. We're breaking all of God's commandments. Jesus said to a young man in Matthew 19, if you will enter into life, keep the commandments. Well, we're coming to the end of the program. Why don't you send away for these two very important booklets, Why Do You Observe Sunday? The second booklet is important, Where Are Enoch and Elijah? We have an interactive Bible study every Saturday at 1 o'clock at the meeting room at 1701 East Missouri. Bring your Bible, a notebook, a pen. Bring your questions. We love questions. We love to try to answer your questions. Bring your questions on any Bible question that you have. We'll try to help you with them. And until next time, this is Meyer Stahl of the Southern New Mexico Church of God saying goodbye, my friends.
You have been listening to What is Truth with Pastor Meyer Stahl of the Southern New Mexico Church of God, located in Las Cruces, New Mexico. For copies of today's lesson or for more information, call area code 575-650-7359. That's 575-650-7359. Join us next week at this same time for another edition of What is Truth? Until next week, we wish you God's richest blessings.